My room suddenly felt small the moment she announced, "I am staying here with you." She was standing in my doorway, suitcase in one hand, rain soaking through her coat, mascara running down her face like she'd been crying since whatever state she drove from. And my room, this 400 square foot space above a hardware store in Whitfield, North Carolina, a room that had felt perfectly fine for a man with nothing left, suddenly felt small. Not because of the square footage, but because the woman announcing she was staying here with me was the same woman who disappeared from my life 7 years ago and left nothing behind but a note that said, "Please don't look for me." Her name was Sutton Price. She was a nurse when I loved her. She was a stranger now. But she was standing in my room like she still belonged in it, announcing she was staying like I didn't get a vote, and the suitcase in her hand told me she hadn't packed for a visit. She'd packed for good. But here's what made my room feel even smaller. It wasn't the suitcase. It wasn't the rain. It was what she was holding in her other hand. A photograph. And in that photograph was a face I'd never seen before, but recognized immediately because it had my grandmother's eyes, my jawline, and a smile that looked exactly like mine. My name is Callum Vance. I'm 38. I'm a carpenter who builds things for other people because everything I ever built for myself got taken. And the woman who just announced she was staying here with me in my room was carrying a secret that was about to make this small room feel like it couldn't hold everything she was about to tell me. But why did she leave 7 years ago without a goodbye? Why did she show up now, tonight, in the rain, announcing she was staying here with me like no time had passed? What was in that photograph that made my hands shake? And what had Sutton Price been carrying for 7 years that she was too afraid to say out loud until she was standing in my room with nowhere left to run? I need to take you back before the suitcase, before the photograph, before she announced she was staying here with me, and my room suddenly felt small. Back to when loving her was the only thing I owned that nobody could repossess. My room was 400 square feet, one window, one burner stove, a mattress on a wooden frame I built myself because I couldn't afford a real bed, a workbench in the corner with tools I couldn't bring myself to sell, even when the lights almost got cut off, and a coffee mug on the counter that said, "Built, not bought," because my grandmother gave it to me when I was 22 and told me that sentence was the only resume I'd ever need. That room was all I had left, and it was just big enough for a man who decided he didn't need much. I was raised by my grandmother, Opal Vance, in a 2-bedroom house with a porch that leaned so far left, my friends used to joke it was trying to leave too. My mother dropped me off when I was 4, said she'd be back in a week. That was 1992. I stopped counting the weeks somewhere around 1996. My father was a name on a birth certificate I never saw. Opal never spoke about either of them unless I asked, and when I asked, she'd say the same thing every time. Some people aren't built to stay, Callum. That's not your fault, and it's not your job to fix. Your job is to build things that last. So I did. I built porches, decks, bookshelves, cabinets, anything someone would pay me to make with my hands. Opal taught me how to measure twice and cut once before I was 10. She taught me how to sand wood until it was smooth enough to press your face against. She'd sit on that leaning porch in the evenings with sweet tea and watch me work in the yard, and she'd say, "A man who builds with his hands will never be empty, Callum, because there's always something that needs fixing in this world." She was 5'2", wore the same apron every day, hands rough as bark from decades of garden work and housekeeping. She cleaned homes for families on the good side of town, came home smelling like other people's furniture polish, and never once complained. She fed me on a housekeeper's salary, kept me in clean clothes, made sure I read books, and loved me so loud that I never once felt like the kid whose mother didn't come back. Because Opal didn't just raise me, she rebuilt me every single day before the world could tear me down. By 22, I had a small carpentry business. By 24, I had a business partner named Dale Furston, who handled the money while I handled the wood. Dale wore nice shirts and had a firm handshake and said things like, "We're going to scale this, brother." I trusted him because he smiled when he talked, and I hadn't yet learned that some people smile widest right before they rob you. But before Dale destroyed my business, before I lost everything and ended up in a 400-square-foot room above a hardware store, there was Sutton. And Sutton is where this story really begins. I was 24. She was 23. Saturday morning at the Jasper Farmers Market in Tennessee. I was selling handmade cutting boards from the back of my truck. She walked up, picked one up, ran her fingers across the grain like she was reading something carved into the wood that I couldn't see, and said, "You made this?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Don't call me ma'am. I'm 23, not 63. My name's Sutton. And this is the most beautiful cutting board I've ever seen," which is a sentence I never thought I'd say out loud. I laughed so hard I knocked over my own display. Boards everywhere. She bent down to help me pick them up. Our hands touched, reaching for the same piece of maple, and neither of us let go for about 3 seconds too long. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much, but when the right person's skin touches yours, 3 seconds rewires your whole nervous system. She was a traveling nurse, moved every 13 weeks, 9 states in 3 years. No permanent address, no permanent anything. She told me she liked it that way. "No roots means no one can pull them up," she said, and she laughed when she said it, but the laugh didn't reach her eyes. I should have heard the warning in that sentence, but I was 24, and she smelled like vanilla, and her laugh sounded like a window being opened in a room that had been closed too long. So instead of hearing the warning, I asked if she wanted to get coffee. She said, "I don't drink coffee." I said, "Neither do I." I just didn't know what else to say. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. And that smile colonized every corner of my brain and never paid rent. We spent 3 years together. She took a permanent position at the Jasper Hospital. First time she'd stayed anywhere longer than 13 weeks. I asked her why. She said, "Because you're the first place that felt worth unpacking for." And I swear I carried that sentence in my chest like a lantern for 3 years. I built us a life, literally. I renovated a small apartment above a bakery on Main Street. Built the bed frame with my own hands, walnut wood, sanded smooth. Built the kitchen table where we ate every meal. Built the bookshelf where she kept her nursing manuals and the novels she read on her days off, dog-eared and coffee-stained. I built her a jewelry box for her birthday with a hinge so smooth it closed without a sound, and I lined the inside with velvet I bought from a fabric shop 3 towns over because nothing in Jasper was soft enough. She cried when I gave it to her, not the polite kind of crying, the kind that starts in the stomach and takes over the whole body. She held that box against her chest and said, "Nobody has ever built me anything before." I said, "Get used to it." She kissed me that night and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere, Callum. I promise." But here's what I need you to understand. Sutton Price grew up in the foster system. 11 homes by the time she was 16. She never told me the details and I never pushed. But I saw the scars. Not the ones on her skin, The ones in the way she flinched when someone raised their voice too fast. The way she always slept closest to the door. The way she kept a packed bag under the bed for the first 6 months we lived together, like her body couldn't believe she was allowed to stay somewhere. I loved her through all of it. I loved her through the nightmares she wouldn't explain. Through the mornings she'd wake up and check the locks twice before she'd eat breakfast. Through the way she'd sometimes go quiet for a whole day, and I'd just sit beside her on the couch and sand a piece of wood in my lap and wait. She never asked me to wait, but I did, because some people tell you who they are with words. Sutton told me with silence, and I learned to listen. We were happy. The kind of happy that scares you because you know you don't deserve it, and you're waiting for the world to figure that out and correct the mistake. And then the world corrected it. I came home on a Thursday afternoon. The apartment was quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight. I walked in and her clothes were gone. Her books were gone. Her nursing bag was gone. The jewelry box I built was sitting on the kitchen table closed, with a note on top. 5 words. Handwritten. Please don't look for me. No reason. No forwarding address. No phone number that worked when I called it 47 times in 3 hours. Just vanilla on the pillow and a silence so loud it cracked something in my chest that I'm not sure ever healed right. I did what the note told me not to do. I looked. I called the hospital. They said she resigned. I called her emergency contact, a woman named Delia, who'd been her foster sister. Delia's number was disconnected. I drove to the farmer's market where we met and sat in my truck in the parking lot until someone knocked on my window and asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I wasn't okay for a long time. Opal drove 4 hours to Jasper when I stopped, answering her calls. She found me in the apartment I'd built for 2, sitting at the kitchen table I'd made with my hands, holding that jewelry box like it was the only proof Sutton Price had ever existed. Opal sat down across from me, put her rough hands over mine, and he said, "Callum, you can't keep someone who decided to leave, but you can decide what you do with what's left of you." I said, "There's nothing left of me, Opal." She squeezed my hands. "Then we build you again. Same way we built you the first time. One board at a time." 6 months later, Dale cleaned out the business account. Took everything. The savings, the contracts, the deposits clients had paid for jobs I'd already bought materials for, gone. I couldn't pay the suppliers, couldn't finish the jobs, couldn't afford a lawyer because the money to hire one was the money Dale stole. I lost the apartment, lost the truck, lost every client who trusted my name. I moved to Whitfield, North Carolina because a man named Jerry Holcomb owned a hardware store and rented the room above it for $400 a month and didn't ask questions when I showed up with nothing but a toolbox and a face that looked like it had been rained on for a year straight. For 7 years, I lived in that room, built furniture for people around town, fixed cabinets, repaired porches, slow work, honest work, barely enough work. Jerry became something like a friend. He'd leave sandwiches outside my door on days he knew I was too proud to eat at his table. I never thanked him for it. He never asked me to. I kept Opal's coffee mug on the counter. I kept my tools sharpened. I kept breathing. But I stopped building things for myself. Every piece of furniture I made went out the door. My room stayed empty on purpose. Because the last time I built something beautiful and put it in my own home, the person I built it for took a piece of me when she left, and I never got it back. I dated once, a woman named Bridget who worked at the post office. Kind eyes, warm laugh. She came over for dinner and saw my room and said, "It's so empty in here, Callum." And I knew she wasn't just talking about the furniture. We lasted 2 months. She said I was the most present man she'd ever met who was completely somewhere else. She was right, because somewhere inside that 400-square-foot room, underneath the sawdust and the solitude and the coffee mug that said, "Built, not bought," there was a space I'd kept sealed shut, a space shaped exactly like Sutton Price. And no matter how many years passed, no matter how many porches I repaired for strangers, no matter how small I made my life so nothing else could be taken from it, that space never closed. It just waited. The way a room waits for someone to come home. And then, on a Tuesday night in November, 7 years after she vanished, my room suddenly felt small. Because Sutton Price was standing in the doorway, announcing she was staying here with me, holding a photograph that was about to tell me why she really left, why she really came back, and why the next 24 hours would either destroy the last wall I had standing or give me something I'd stopped believing I was allowed to have. But what was in that photograph? What secret had Sutton been carrying for 7 years? And why did she wait until tonight to announce she was staying here with me when she'd spent 7 years making sure I couldn't find her? She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, set the suitcase down by the door, stood there dripping rain onto my floor, breathing hard, holding that photograph against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her heart from falling out. I didn't move. Couldn't. Because my room suddenly felt small and my chest felt smaller. And the woman who told me not to look for her was standing close enough to touch. But I didn't trust my hands not to shake if I reached for her. Sutton. My voice came out like rust. 7 years. I know. Her chin trembled. I know how long it's been. You left a note. 5 words. You disappeared. And now you're in my room announcing you're staying here with me like I'm supposed to just... Look at the photograph, Callum. She held it out. Her hand was shaking so badly, the image blurred. I took it, turned it toward the light from my one window, and my legs almost gave out. A little girl. 6 years old, maybe 7. Brown curls. My jawline. Opal's eyes staring back at me from a face I'd never seen, but already knew. She was sitting on a swing, laughing, holding a stuffed rabbit, wearing a yellow dress. And on the back, written in Sutton's handwriting, 2 words. Lily Vance. Vance. She gave her my name. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of my workbench. Sutton, is this... She's yours. Sutton's voice broke wide open. She's ours. And I have been raising her alone for 7 years because I was trying to protect her from the same thing I spent my whole childhood surviving. What are you talking about? Her whole body was trembling now. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, Callum. I left because a man showed up at our apartment the week you were in Knoxville on that job. Said his name was Dale Furston. Said he was your business partner. But he didn't come to talk about business. My blood went cold. Dale. The same Dale who smiled while he robbed me. He told me he'd been watching me. Told me he knew I had no family, no safety net, no one who'd come looking if I disappeared. He said if I didn't leave you quietly, he'd make sure I disappeared the hard way. And Callum, she pressed her hand against her stomach like the memory still lived there. I was 6 weeks pregnant, and I chose her life over everything else, including you. My knees hit the floor, not because I chose to kneel, because my body couldn't hold what she'd just said and stay standing at the same time. The photograph was in my hand, my daughter's face looking up at me. In 7 years of believing Sutton left because I wasn't enough shattered across that small room floor like glass I'd been walking on my whole life without knowing it. But where was Lily now? Why did Sutton come back tonight? And what happened to Dale Furston, The man who stole my money, my partner, and 7 years of my daughter's life. She's in the car, Sutton whispered, asleep in the back seat. I drove 11 hours straight because Dale found us again. He got out of prison 3 weeks ago. Fraud charges, the same ones from your business. He tracked me down in Virginia, showed up at Lily's school, and I ran, Callum. The only place I knew to run was here. To you, I was on my feet before she finished. I walked past her, down the stairs, into the rain, opened the back door of her car, and there she was. Lily, my daughter. Curled up under a blanket with that same stuffed rabbit from the photograph, brown curls across her face, breathing soft and steady the way only children can when they don't yet know the world is shaking around them. I stood in that rain and cried. Not quiet crying, the kind that starts in a place so deep you didn't know it existed until something cracks it open. 7 years, 7 birthdays, 7 first days of school, her first word, her first step, her first scraped knee. All of it stolen by a man who smiled while he destroyed everything I loved. I carried her upstairs. She didn't wake. I laid her on my bed, the bed I built with my own hands, and she curled into the pillow like she'd been sleeping there her whole life. Sutton stood behind me, arms wrapped around herself, watching me watch our daughter. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't fight harder. I'm sorry I believed him. I'm sorry I took her from you." I turned around, took her face in my hands, those same hands that built cutting boards and bed frames and bookshelves, hands that never learned how to hold on to people. But tonight, they learned. You didn't take her from me. You kept her alive, and you brought her home. She collapsed into my chest, and my room, this 400-square-foot space that had felt perfectly fine for a man who decided he didn't need much, suddenly felt small again. But not because there wasn't enough space, because for the first time in 7 years, it was full. Full of rain-soaked coats and a suitcase by the door, and a little girl breathing softly on a bed her father built before he knew she existed. The next morning, Lily woke up. She looked at me with Opal's eyes and said, "Are you Callum? Mama said you build things." I knelt down. "Yeah, sweetheart, I build things." She held up her stuffed rabbit. The ear was torn, hanging by a thread. "Can you fix Rosie?" I took that rabbit, held it like it was made of gold. "Yeah, I can fix Rosie." She smiled, my smile, my grandmother's eyes, and a laugh that sounded like every window in that small room opening at once. I called Opal that afternoon. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. I said, "Opal, you have a great granddaughter. Her name is Lily. She has your eyes." Silence. Then a sound I'd never heard before. Opal Vance, the strongest woman I'd ever known, sobbing into the phone. "Bring her home, Callum. You bring that baby home to me right now." We drove to Opal's house that weekend. Lily ran up that leaning porch, and Opal caught her in arms that had held me together my whole life. She looked at Lily's face, touched her curls, and said, "Lord, you look just like your daddy when he was small." Lily said, "My daddy builds things." Opal looked at me over Lily's shoulder, tears streaming. "Yes, he does, baby. He builds things that last." Dale Furston was arrested 6 days later. Violation of parole, stalking, intimidation. Jerry Holcomb, the hardware store owner who'd been leaving sandwiches outside my door for 7 years, turned out to have a brother who was a detective in Virginia. One phone call. Dale was done. Some doors deserved to stay locked from the outside. I married Sutton Price on a Saturday afternoon in Opal's backyard. No venue, no caterer. Just the leaning porch, a handful of good people, and a little girl in a yellow dress who held the rings on a pillow I built the night before. Sutton wore white, Opal wore her Sunday best. Jerry brought sandwiches. And when the pastor said, "You may kiss the bride," Lily squeezed between us and said, "Me too." And we both kissed her forehead at the same time. And my room, my life, my chest, all of it felt small again. But the good kind of small, the kind that means everything you love is close enough to touch. I still have that coffee mug. Built, not bought. I drink from it every morning in a house I built with my own hands. 3 bedrooms, a porch that doesn't lean, a bookshelf with nursing manuals and dog-eared novels, and a stuffed rabbit named Rosie, whose ear I stitched back together on the first morning my daughter ever looked at me and asked me to fix something. And I fixed it, the way Opal fixed me, one board at a time. So if you're listening right now and your room feels too small for what life is asking you to carry, hear me. Sometimes the room isn't too small. Sometimes it's just waiting to be filled by the people who were always supposed to be in it. And sometimes the woman standing in your doorway with rain in her hair and a secret in her hands isn't there to take something from you. She's there to give you back everything that was stolen. And if this story moved something inside your chest, if it made you think about the person you lost, or the child you're raising alone, or the grandmother who rebuilt you when the world broke you down, hit that subscribe button right now. Tap that notification bell so you never miss a story. Because this channel is where broken things get rebuilt, lost people find their way home, and small rooms become big enough to hold everything that matters. I'll see you in the next one.